Hey guys, my name is Kenton. I am a professional mountaineer and I've stood on the summit of Everest no less than 14 times. So I feel that I'm in a pretty good place to take you safely on the journey. Now our journey will start in Kathmandu, the bustling, colourful, polluted, noisy capital of Nepal. And after a couple of days there, then our journey starts in earnest. And to begin with, what we have to do is to fly to Lukla Airport, which is deep in the Himalayas. Now you get on a little twin-engine propeller plane and you fly through the Himalayan foothills, and there, out of nowhere, in the distance, you can see the strip of Lukla. It's meant to be one of the most dangerous airports in the world. The runway is inclined 15 degrees, and as the plane comes in, there's no instrument landing here. It's all line of sight, dead reckoning. The pilots are working hard. You get off, all the other passengers get on who are leaving Lukla, and the plane hardly stops, turns around and shoots back down the runway and is airborne again, disappearing into the distance. And you're left there on the tarmac at the very start of the adventure to Everest Base Camp. 2 days trekking will get you to Namchi Bazaar, the Sherpa capital. Well, we call it a capital. It's tiny compared with most villages or towns, or certainly capitals around the world. And it's nestled in this perfect amphitheatre with the most amazing view, looking out to some of the neighbouring mountains of Kusum Kanguru or Kwande. There are no motor vehicles at all. So everything comes on the back of the porters or perhaps on the back of the yaks. After a couple of days in Namchi Bazaar, then our bodies acclimatized, we're back on the trail, heading towards base camp. And from this point onwards, the view is dominated by the most beautiful mountain, I think, in the world, Amadablam, often called the Matterhorn of the Himalayas. Beautiful mountain, and she will dominate the view for the next 4 or 5 days. And then after about 7 or 8 days trekking, depending how fast you are, you do finally arrive at Everest Base Camp. And the odd thing about this, you can't actually see the summit of Everest from the base camp. In fact, you can't really see the mountain at all. The base camp is nestled at the end of the Kumbu Valley. And at one end you have the Lukla, which is a pass between China and Nepal. And you have these colossal mountains. You have Lingtrim and Pomori and Nuptse. They really dominate the skyline. Fantastic, jagged looking mountains. But if you want to see Everest herself, you have to head down the valley a little bit. She just pokes her nose out every now and then on the trek. So you've got to keep an eagle eye open for her. Now, Everest Base Camp, for many, will be the pinnacle of the achievement. But for those who are looking to go that little bit further above and beyond, and those who are looking to go to the summit, this is their starting point. We're now at 5,300 meters above sea level. Now that's higher than Mont Blanc, which is the highest point in Western Europe. That just puts it into perspective. But at some stage, the climbers have to start looking upwards. And the first obstacle that the climbers have to overcome is the Kumbu Ice Fall, a river of ice that crashes down the mountainside. And as it comes down the mountainside, it encounters like a big drop-off, a steepening in the slope angle, and the ice breaks open. So it is a very dangerous place, but at the same time, as I said, is a thing of absolute beauty. And the climbers have to find their way through this, round the crevasses, over the narrow fins of ice, and occasionally we find a crevasse we can't go around. So in those instances, we have to build literally a bridge of ladders, and you will see the climbers very tentatively climbing across these ladders to get to the other side. Once up the top of the ice fall, you have the Western Cwm open out. The Western Cwm is a hidden valley first person ever to see into the Western Cwm was back in 1921. George Mallory. He was on the very early Everest expeditions, and he climbed up from China, or Chinese Tibet, onto what's known as the Lukla, a col between the two countries of China and Nepal. And it's maybe a kilometre and a half wide, and maybe 5 kilometres long. And it's bounded by Everest herself on one side, Mount Lhotse, the 4th highest mountain in the world, at the end. And on this side, your right-hand side, as you're walking up the valley, is Mount Nuptse, the 19th highest mountain in the world. It is, without a doubt, the most beautiful place I have ever been. It's sensational. And this is the site of Camp 2 on Everest. And Camp 2 is a staging point where the climbers might rest and recover for a little while, and we store our equipment while our bodies slowly acclimatise to the altitude. And it's relatively comfortable if you consider the height of nearly 6,400 metres above sea level. Now, from Camp 2, our eyes start being drawn up towards the summit. Finally, at some stage, our weather window will occur, because the thing that governs whether we can climb to the top of Everest or not is the jet stream. The wind, that super high altitude that blows so fiercely, can be up to 200 miles an hour. And it's utterly impossible to climb the mountain when that wind is blowing. So as climbers, we have to wait for the weather to be just right. And it's a little battle between the jet stream and the monsoon. And as the monsoon builds up in the Bay of Bengal and becomes more powerful, it slowly pushes the jet stream north. And the climbers have a very brief period where the jet stream gets pushed north and the monsoon's not quite arrived. And that is our chance to get to the top. We'll climb up from Camp 2 up to Camp 3, partway up the Lhotse face. The Lhotse face is where the ice for the Kumbu Ice Fall comes from. It comes cascading down from the upper reaches of Mount Lhotse and forms a unrelenting wall of ice, average angle of maybe 50 degrees. And it's perhaps 1,600 vertical meters of uninterrupted snow and ice. It's so big, we have to dig out the tent platforms for Camp 3 there. And that's where we spend our penultimate night. We wake in the morning, we don our oxygen gear and our down suits for the first time, and we grind our way up, getting ever higher to the last camp on Everest, Camp 4 on the South Col. This is now at 8,000 meters above sea level. Now this is what the climbers call the death zone, where there's not enough oxygen in the atmosphere to keep the climbers alive. Hence the reason why we use supplementary oxygen. Camp 4, always windy. You battle to put the tents up in the wind, you crawl inside them for a few hours rest in your sleeping bag, try and get some food and nutrition and water down inside you, and then the climbers leave about 10 o'clock at night to start battling their way to the very roof of the world. Now the reason why we start at 10 o'clock at night is to allow us enough time. We climb upwards in the middle of the night, hoping to get to the balcony for dawn. That's 8,500 meters. Happens to be the site of Sir Edmund Hillary and Sherpa Tenzing, the guys that made the first ascent of Everest back in '53. The balcony was their last tented site or tented campsite before the summit. But for us, it's an oxygen changeover point, and we swap one cylinder, put a fresh cylinder of oxygen on our backs, and head up towards the south summit. By now, the sun should be coming up over our right-hand shoulder, casting a mesmerizing shadow of Everest herself on the lower part of the Kumbu Valley. It is one of the most wonderful sights ever. But the climbers have to stay focused. We come to the south summit, 8,700 meters. We drop down slightly. And this is arguably the most precarious point of the whole climb. We very carefully pick our way across the ridge to to the site or what used to be the Hillary Step. And although now it's just snow rather than rock, it's still a barrier for the climbers. But get up and over that, and then poof, the summit slopes start to ease off, and you've got the last perhaps 25-30 minutes to the summit. And when you get there, it is something to behold. You're stood there, you will be the highest person on the planet. Just imagine that for 1 second. The whole world is underneath your feet. And the view stretches forever in all directions. It is beyond words. But of course, the climbers are only halfway there. You still have to make it back down. And as a very good friend of mine, the American climber Ed Viesturs famously once said, getting to the top is optional, but getting back down is mandatory. Now, the descent is always fraught with danger, but the climbers, staying focused with a great Sherpa team around them, will carefully pick their way back down the mountain. They will get back down to Camp 4, pack up their belongings if there are time, and then come all the way back down to Camp 2 to stay another night on the mountain. But by the time the climbers get to Camp 2, they kind of know that the ascent is in the bag. They've only got to get up in the morning and then make their way back down through the Kumbu Ice Fall back to base camp. And once you're at base camp, well, that's where the relief and the celebration can finally set in. We celebrate initially with cups of tea to rehydrate, but we perhaps swiftly move on to this wonderful locally brewed beer called Chang, which is made from a fermented sort of rice water. And then, of course, everything is slightly tinged with sadness because the end of the expedition is nigh. And that's always a sad thing because that experience is now going to be put in our memory banks. And no matter how many expeditions we do, how many adventures that we go on, no two adventure is exactly the same. And that's the wonderful thing about adventure. It's different for everybody. And people say sometimes, how come you've climbed Everest 14 times with all the other mountains around in the world? Well, it's not just Everest I climb. I do climb all over the world. But I have a special love affair with that one mountain. And it is different every single time I go there. Now, climbing Everest isn't available to us all, but we all do have our own Everest inside us. And that may be running a 5K race. It may be going camping in your back garden. Or in my case, it is Everest herself. But the important thing is that we identify what our own Everest is, and we plan for it, and then we go and do it. Because trust me, adventure will bring you alive. Now you can join me on a live Q&A session once this has gone live, and I look forward to seeing you all live then. Have your questions ready? Doesn't matter how silly you think the question may be, or how intricate or complex it may be. Store them up and get in contact, and I'll be delighted to let you know what the answer is. So from me now, take care, be safe, and I hope to see you all in the mountains one day soon. Take care.